The human spirit can't be boxed in. It's too funny, too deep, too naughty, too nice, too everything worth living. Trip on This is an invitation to live your most courageous life. It explores all the joy, pleasure, depth, and fullness of what it means to be alive. Through engaging conversations around psychedelics, futurism, sexuality, and wellness, together we open the door to limitless possibilities. My name is Kat Walsh, and I am honored to be your guide. Let the journey begin. The content shared on Trip on This, including all discussions by Kat Walsh and guests, is for educational and entertainment purposes only. We do not endorse or encourage the use of controlled or prohibited substances. Always consult with a qualified professional before making any decisions related to your health, mental well-being, or legal matters. Viewer discretion is advised. Let's get into it. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Trip on This. It's your host, Kat, and I am so looking forward to introducing our next guest, Eva Clay. Eva is a renowned psychotherapist. She's a sex educator and a speaker with over 2 decades of experience. She's also a thought leader in the field of sexuality and psychedelic therapy, and is passionate about ketamine-assisted therapy, particularly for menopausal women. Eva, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my God, I'm so excited for this talk.
Good, because me too. Once you said to me, I'm passionate about sex, ketamine, and menopause, I was like, yeah, let's just get right into that. Let's get into it, because I actually know your background. And I think one of the most wonderful parts of you sharing your story is actually how you now are a sex educator and helping people get to their pleasure and their intimacy, especially because the first, let's just call your first life, half of your life, right, was a completely different track. I'd love for you to start talking about how'd you get here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I am, classically trained as a psychotherapist and a social worker, and I worked on the front lines of women's sexual wellness for over 20 years, but really coming from more of a clinical and academic perspective. And it wasn't until I had my own kind of sexual revolution that I started to integrate more holistic and alternative approaches to supporting women in their healthy sexual expression. And how that migration happened, of course, in my own experience, was that I completely lost my libido. Like all of a sudden, one day I woke up, it was gone. And I happened to be married at the time that happened. And it set me on this path of trying to figure out desire.
Yeah.
And I came at it very much from a Western medical model, which is where most women begin, testing their hormones, talking to their OBGYN, going to therapy to figure out what was wrong with me. I did all of that.
Was it sudden? I just want to quick. Was it really like, did you wake up one day, or was it slowly happening over time? Like, I'm actually sorry, that's such a literal question, but did you really feel a shift so quickly, or was it over time?
Well, I have to asterisk this because I'm going to, spoiler alert to this story. What was going on with me was the dynamic in my relationship.
Yes. Okay.
And so that began to build over time.
Yes.
And of course, none of these avenues that I was exploring ever questioned what's actually going on in the marriage.
Right.
What's happening with your sexual partner that might be shutting down your libido, instead of like testing me in so many different ways and psychoanalyzing what the fuck is wrong with me.
Oh my gosh. It feels obvious, but here we are.
It's obvious. I mean, like, and now it does, but like, we're a little down the line with our sexuality, but even our couples therapy, went to couples therapy for years, and no one ever talked about sex and how the dynamics in a relationship will impact a woman's desire and libido.
Of course.
So once that marriage ended, regretfully, it was a beautiful marriage, but lots of things we couldn't figure out, right? And I had kind of a sexual revolution of my own. And a funny thing happened is, as soon as the marriage ended, I got my libido back.
Well, it's good to, I mean, it's also, it's both liberating, but also just to see nothing's wrong. I'm sure so many women, and I'm sure you went through this too. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel like this? Am I ever going to get it back? Yeah.
Am I ever going to get it back?
Yeah.
And so then, I entered a period, it was pretty short actually, of sexual exploration. And you and I chatted a little bit about this. I also threw myself into a lot of study, the science of female desire and as it intersects with our psyche and also our spirit, our spirituality.
Yeah.
And psychedelics very much had a big role in that for me.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was my first ayahuasca ceremony. Such a powerful medicine, but I went into that ceremony as my marriage was on the rocks. And I found myself attracted to other men, but not my husband, even though he's gorgeous, And I came in with this question of, should I save my marriage or should I let it go?
Right.
And the answer I got back from the medicine was, you're asking the wrong question. So leaning into what is the inquiry then? The inquiry was, how do you let yourself be loved?
Yeah.
And so the marriage dissolved, and I then went in with this inquiry. How can I let myself be loved? And for me, at that time of my consciousness, it was well, let's try polyamory and really let myself be loved,
Yeah.
And after about, 6 months of that, it didn't take very long. I was yeah, that's not the way.
Yeah. It's the way for some, but it's,
for me,
that's a tough,
and the way that I was doing it also was not all that great at the time. Yeah. But it started just to feel like traffic on my soul, not just sexually, but emotionally. It was just noise and traffic for me where I was at that time. I'm not knocking polyamory or ENM or anything like that, but for me. And so then my second awakening came also through psychedelics, through cannabis, actually.
Oh, yeah.
When one day I was sitting on a log after a really rambunctious party. I was in the forest and I heard a voice say, stop it. Stop this now. And I went into a year of celibacy. And that's when I discovered Tantra, sexual Tantra, with myself as my primary partner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this was about 13 years ago. So that turned me on a path in a completely new direction of actually making sex sacred, especially for women, and weaving in discernment and embodiment and clarity and self-love into all of our sexual choices. So I'm a little bit of the inverted sex therapist, sex educator. A lot of us, God bless us, I love all of my colleagues, will try to open a woman's sexuality and open and give permission and all of this. And this is so important and wonderful to do. And I'm more the person to come along and say, hold up a minute.
I see. Yeah.
Let's come to this with a lot of reverence and a lot of clarity, my sisters. So that's more my message. And I love weaving in psychedelics with this work. It's so important. And yeah, that's my story.
How so? I mean, I'm just going to jump around because I have questions around that. How is psychedelics? I'd like to take a step back actually and talk a little bit about Tantra. For those that are not familiar with Tantra, what is that? If you were going to explain it to somebody on the street, what is this? What does that even mean? Sacred sexuality?
Yeah. So I just want to give a little disclaimer that Tantra is also a non-sexual practice in its most ancient, purest form, is a non-sexual practice. Okay. So when we're referring to Tantra now, really what we're referring to is Neo-Tantra. The shorthand of how I explain this is somebody came along and said, oh, this would work really well for sex. And
then we're yes.
and it does work really, right? It does work really well for sex. So Tantra is a vast system, kind of like when you say the word yoga.
Yes.
So it can incorporate many different branches. So, but when we're talking about Neo-Tantra or sexual Tantra, the sort of shorthand of this, how I would describe it, is a way of embodying yourself and a way of looking at the world that is non-dual. There's no right and there's no wrong. Tantra is really a practice that's all about following your pleasure and trusting that compass. It's not about hedonistic, addictive, dopamine-driven pleasure, but it's about kind of following your bliss. And actually that bliss and that embodied pleasure is the ultimate gateway to God. That is how we meet the universe. And when we work with a partner in this framework, that partner is a facilitator to you having a greater experience of God.
Beautifully
and
so.
through a set of practices. We co-facilitate touching and embodying the divine through each other.
Thank you. Thank you. It reminds me actually of what I kind of just having a little bit of an ego death this week, to be honest. It actually feels very much like a ego. The one time that I had a true ego dissolution, what was scary about that for myself was that my mind just didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand that I was having an ego dissolution. And so that was a scary place to be. And this week I found myself realizing that a direction I was about to go, certain directions are working, but other directions where I kind of thought, this is the way that I'm going to do because it's the most obvious and it makes the most sense to my mind to go this direction. I just recently realized, like, I really don't think I want to do that. And my joy and my bliss just wasn't in it. Like, I was like, wait a minute, hold on. I feel like I should be following the feeling of what feels good to help me navigate everything that I'm doing. And I'm doing this because my mind says, what else? It doesn't understand what else. So it's just choosing a path that doesn't feel good. And it might not be exactly the same, but I came to this realization of, I want to follow my joy and my passion. Like, I want to go towards that direction. And if I don't know exactly what that is quite yet, to trust the space that it will show itself as it always has in the past. Is that kind of a similar tantric lens?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the work here, I love this story, and congratulations on really trusting yourself and following that. The key tool here is discernment, to understand when you're following your rocks, like getting your rocks off, when you're following some story of validation or escapism or overindulgence, like, and discerning that from what is somatically vibrating as truth in your body. And that will essentially feel good. You will feel a yes in your body. So it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a yes to not that, but the fear then still lies in but now what? That part still is sitting out and needing the grace from me at the moment, but I'm giving it to myself, because once I came to the conclusion that, no, I want to follow what feels good, and honestly, joy, like actually creating spaces of joy and fun and allowing people to experience their bliss actually is something that is where I shine, actually, even in the context of like my life. And so I'm like, what am I going to do with that? I don't know yet, but the deeper inquiry is there. I do want to come back to psychedelics though, and how you are working with women in their own sexual awakening with psychedelics, safely embodied. Who's it right for? Just talk to me about your process.
Yeah. So I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be working with ketamine as a psychedelic. I've been working with MDMA for a long time underground, and really a big believer in psychedelic medicine. But the reason I love ketamine, there's so many reasons to love it, is specifically how it interacts with women, with the female body and an estrogen dominant body. And just to kind of skip over a lot of the science, I'm happy to post some research so you can put in your show notes. I really want people to understand this for themselves. But ketamine to me is an essentially feminine experience. And it has a unique dance in the way that it relates to estrogen. And if you're interested in this, it works on the NMDA receptors in the brain. So it's a novel antidepressant. And really the results of so much research is like astounding. It's really mind blowing what we're finding. And continuing research ongoing with ketamine, in that it has such a short half-life in the body. It's relatively less toxic than even many other plant medicines. And that for the female experience, we're looking at how it reduces not only depression, but social isolation, social anxiety. And it's helping women. It helped myself greatly through perimenopause and into menopause in making that transition. And part of that has to do with its role with estrogens. There's also in terms of the psychosocial element. So I'm just going to get like really real with you, if that's okay.
Yeah,
so So in my own perimenopausal journey, which lasts about 5 years, 5 years is the average time a woman goes through this arc in her life, but it could be anywhere from 2 to 10 years. 10 fucking years for some women. We go through this. This is a major, major chapter of our lives. And what's really common for women in this phase is that they start suddenly growing contempt, distaste, resentment for their partner, especially if they have a male partner. This is a well-documented phenomenon. And it's really hard because you're miserable, you're hot flashing, you're moody. It's like, the aggravation. But for whatever reason, like suddenly not always, but often the male partner in their life starts to look different.
Okay. Do pheromones actually, does that pheromone charge that you initially have actually begin to change? Do we know that? I don't know. That's like, that initial attraction, because hormones are changing. It's all chemistry, right? It's hormones. So if that's changing, well, it makes sense that other things with attraction might change as well.
Absolutely. I mean, look at women who become pregnant. I don't know if you've had children. I have not had children from my body, but you hear about women who are pregnant suddenly are grossed out by their male partner's smell, or don't want to sleep in the bed with him, or, so hormones are everything. Hormones are the lens of our complete reality. And I think more and more we're realizing is once you get pregnant or go through menopause, you understand that it changes your lens on the world. It also changes your lens on yourself.
Yes.
So I'm going to bookmark that and come back to that in regards to ketamine. But I wanted to share with you a recent study that I read. Oh, this is hilarious. This is so interesting. Okay. I'm going to summarize for you. So this was a study with rats, not human subjects, but with rats. So, they took the rats, half of them were given ketamine, half of them were given a saline solution. And then they set the rats free. These are female rats, half got ketamine, half got saline, set them free into a little enclosure with a bunch of sexually vigorous male rats.
Okay.
To see what the female rats would do if they
horny
were
rats. Got it. A horny rat study. I'm in.
So the ketamine treated subjects spent significantly more time with the male rats.
Interesting.
Than the rats who were not treated with ketamine.
So literally like an aphrodisiac or something? Something's happening.
Yeah. And they also, this was hilarious how they worded it. The ketamine treated female rats spent significantly more time with the male rats after having sex with them.
Oh, interesting. So just even the bonding of the experience?
Yeah. So in the language of the study, the likelihood of leaving the male rat after mounting with that rat went down if they were on ketamine. So the female rats given ketamine actually stayed with the male rat after they had sex with them. The female rats who were not given ketamine,
bye. That is actually the most clear description I've seen. Pardon the interruption, my friends, but this is something you're going to want to hear. Obviously, here on Trip on This, we are oftentimes talking about things that we can't have, not legally anyway. But that is not to say that there are not natural, psychoactive, effective plants that we can have legally and safely at our house. What am I talking about? Kanna. Today's sponsor is Ka Empathogenics. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but Kanna is considered nature's MDMA. And I just want to say, Ka definitely did not ask me to say that, but this is how it's known. Nature's MDMA because of its heart-opening effects. It's actually a trip in itself because it's both calming and energizing at the same time. That is actually the feeling that I felt literally right before I got on here, because I actually tried some of the tincture that I'm holding right here and one of the chews. I actually had something that really kind of threw me for a loop right before I took it. And so I was kind of processing that and noticed just how quickly I was able to move out of the disappointment, I guess, of what I was feeling into, you know what, I'm fine. Everything's great. I trust the process. I trust the unfolding of my life. And I got back into a good mood and was just like, life's good. Everything is fine. And so obviously the fact that Kanna is known to help with improving mood really showed me how quickly I was able to get myself back into homeostasis. Now, you're probably wondering, what is Kanna? Kanna is a South African plant that has been known for thousands of years for being a game changer for mental health, for physical health, for spiritual health, even for relational health. And now modern science is finally coming along and actually seeing in clinical trials that Kana can also help reduce stress. It lifts mood, it improves focus, it helps people feel connected to themselves, and just an overall sense of aliveness. Ka is the highest quality Kana supplement on the market that's safe, legal, and non-addictive. The last thing I want to say on a personal note is that when I first had Ka, I had the chews and I loved them. But I do want to say that when you eat them, you really do have like a very tingly mouth. And it's an herbal supplement, you guys. So don't be thinking you're getting like just some gummies from the candy store. It's got its own unique flavor profile. And the tincture is nice and sweet with a little bit of the tingle. If you are interested in trying Ka, head over to their website at ohmyka.com. You guys, when I read that, I first was like, oh my Ka. I was like, oh my Ka. Oh, how clever. If you head over there right now, you can use the code TRIP on this and get 10% off when you use my code. Again, TRIP on this will get you 10% off. And the website, say it with me, folks. Oh my Ka. Last very important note. Ka is a natural serotonin reuptake inhibitor and contraindicated for anyone who is taking SSRIs, MAOIs, SNRIs, NDRIs, benzodiazepines, and CNS depressants. So definitely talk to a qualified healthcare professional if you are interested in trying Ka as a natural alternative to chemical SSRIs. There we have it, folks. Thank you so much to Ka for sponsoring today's episode. And now we're back to the show. And this is actually going to be a question, a technical one around like dosage, because ketamine, for those listening, is a dissociative. A lot of ketamine, you can't even feel your body. Like you're so numb. And through that dissociation, that's why they're actually looking at it for things like PTSD as well, and other healing where you can visit some of those sticky areas in life and you're not feeling it maybe as somatically and on all levels, really. So you would think like anything that's desensitizing us from the body wouldn't be more pleasurable. I'd love for you to talk about that. Is it about dosage? Is it about how do we make sense of this?
Yes, in part. So one of the brilliant effects of ketamine is that it's a neuro anti-inflammatory.
Okay.
So neural inflammation is what we're looking at is really the new root cause of depression. So in addition to looking at gut health as being a root cause of depression, we're also looking at neural inflammation. Now, especially women who are going through perimenopause, menopause, and having hormonal fluctuations, even women with premenstrual dysphoric disorder who like severe PMS are having these big, flourishes of estrogen, rise and decline of estrogen. Again, ketamine dances beautifully with the estrogen. And it also shrinks brain areas that are inflamed and then cause the secondary mood disorders.
Oh, what?
So it's just Google it, my friend.
Oh my God. I didn't know that. I didn't realize, because the way that I had always understood the ketamine's impact with depression has really been around all the new connections, the new
neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, thank you. That is created, but that it's actually having an effect on the inflammation. That's interesting. Does that inflammation? Do you know if it has any effect on the body's inflammation? I mean, so many of us we're all struggling with inflammatory diseases across the board, right? This is what autoimmune is and everything. Are we seeing anything about actual body inflammation?
So there is some research beginning to come out about that. And there's been a lot of extrapolation that if it's a great neural anti-inflammatory, of course, why wouldn't it be a whole systemic anti-inflammatory? We don't know that for certain, but people who do have inflammatory diseases are not restricted from working with ketamine. I know I did. I had very severe systemic inflammation from mast cell activation syndrome, which is all inflammation. And it helped me so much. And so we're looking at ketamine, how it can, cross so many different, it ticks so many boxes. So we're looking at inflammation. We're looking at NMDA receptors. We're looking at neuroplasticity. And now with the dissociative question that you're asking, some of it is dose dependent. Now, people can go into the full dissociative dose through, let's say, an injection, for example, and still get all of these incredible benefits, and they won't even remember their journey.
Right.
So I don't necessarily recommend that. We don't actually need to go that high in the dosing.
Okay.
And more research is coming out. This is the latest research we have, that actually the lower doses are more efficacious for depression.
Interesting. And
so
in lozenge, does it matter about the way in which you take it? Like, can it be a low dose lozenge, injection, IV? Does it matter?
So what the research has told us so far is that the route of administration doesn't really matter, but what does matter is how it's framed and held. Of course, the set and setting.
Yeah.
So if you're going into an IV clinic and just getting the IV drip and not getting any therapy or support, you're going to have drastically lower outcomes than people who have a very low dose and are working with a psychotherapist. So this is more of what I do and what I recommend if you really want to get the greatest benefit from ketamine.
Yeah.
I said, don't even waste your time going into an IV clinic and just sitting there, getting the drip and going home.
Yeah.
It's just like a waste of time and money, in my opinion. So those are what the outcomes are telling us.
I do like this idea. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about just that process of, so lower doses, how long is that journey? Are you talking to people that day? Are you talking about what their intention is? Do they come back and talk to you? Let's just like process actually, if people are interested in sitting with you, sitting with this medicine, right? What's the protocol?
Yeah. What's the deal?
Yeah. What's the deal? What does it look like? I'm going in. What am I going to be expected to do here?
Okay. So first of all, I want to address the question I get a lot about ketamine abuse. And, Matthew Perry had some kind of ketamine involvement with his death, et cetera. And the thing about ketamine is so effective and it's so brilliant. And it happens to be very pleasurable. So while it's really hard to abuse ayahuasca, for example, or ibogaine, because like who wants to do that? Ketamine feels fucking good. And so it is a high risk for abuse. Now, that said, it's difficult to overdose on ketamine. It can be habit forming. So we want to just like really monitor this administration. So that's my disclaimer.
Yes.
And now what it looks like to actually work with ketamine, I'll just describe my approach and what actually, after having all my training and my experience, all my years of psychedelics, this is what I think works the best, just my own anecdotal, okay? Definitely in conjunction with a very skillful trained psychotherapist who's trained not only in psychedelic medicine, but in ketamine specifically. Ketamine is a very unique molecule. Even like the playlist that you listen to, don't listen to other journey playlists. What worked for you with psilocybin or MDMA is not going to have the same effect on ketamine. So working with someone who understands this molecule personally and has experience is super important. It has a distinct signature. Yeah. And now I like to work with people using a low to moderate dose. I am not opposed to the full anesthetic experience. And you can have a beautiful journey in this way. And it very much puts you in the back of your body. It's very yin. It can be very restful. It can be very nourishing. It can be very subtle and have the most profound effect. When I work with them in person, I have a dedicated ceremony space. And I invite people to come. They fly in from all over the world for a short retreat with me, and some are local, but they come into my medicine space. I have a beautiful fireplace. They do their lozenge or whatever route of administration has been prescribed by their provider. And I like to integrate hypnosis because I am a licensed hypnotherapist. I integrate IFS, internal family systems parts work with the experience, as well as somatic psychotherapy and lots of different models I'm trained in. So they'll do the lozenge or whatever route they're using, maybe a nasal spray. And I have a guided playlist. And sometimes we begin with some gentle movement because it comes on in a very sensual way. So a little bit of somatic warm up, body awareness. And then typically at a certain point, especially dose dependent, they don't want to move anymore. Right. They want to go, they want to go down. They're like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what I'm talking about, back of the body. And they'll go down, eye shades on. But while they're going down, the brain enters this incredibly neuroplastic state, like wildly neuroplastic. I tell my patients to think about your brain as being wet cement.
Okay. Yeah.
And so whatever we want to imprint into your brain in these states is really important and such an opportunity. So they give me all the stuff that they want. And while they're going into that highly wet cement state, I implant it. Suggestion, get into the subconscious and just wire that into the reality.
Oh my God, that's so cool. That's really cool, because I was wondering about, is this an active time? You know, I've had one big journey, and I honestly, I was like, I don't even know what happened. I can't even speak to the experience, you know, in terms of
with ketamine.
Yeah. I had a giant dose, and I was like, what? I was fun, but I was like, what happened? But if somebody was talking to me, and, you know, it's a little different in terms of like mushrooms tended to be a little bit more visionary in terms of like ideas and fears and things. It's got a very different signature than ketamine, as you know. Very, very different.
So you don't need to go that big with ketamine. In fact, it's better if you don't. Yeah. But here's what makes ketamine different is that because it is dissociative, I'm going to give like a little science shortcut. Yeah. So this is my metaphor, that it can actually dissociate you from something you choose to be dissociated from.
I love that. Uh-huh.
For example, when I was deep in perimenopause and agonizing over my body changes, I gained a lot of weight in perimenopause from just hormonal stuff and awful systemic stuff. And no matter what I did, like I couldn't stop the weight from coming on. And it spun me out. It was like terrifying to me. And I've been so identified with my sexuality and my body and my appearance. And I went into ketamine and I asked the molecule. And once I started to feel like, oh, this is dissociative, this is wild. Okay, what do I want to peel myself away from? And it was that negative body image.
Oh, I love that.
Uh-huh. I chose to distance that. And I thought, oh my God, we can totally work with this. Like, what other factions of my identity do I want to unwind? So you want to let go of things when you're in that state. That's the time to start tossing it out. And not to mention, the most important part of this is that working on the NMDA system in the glutamate system in your brain, it interrupts the stories that you've created about yourself and about the world, maybe about your partner, wink, wink. And you can write a new story. So it literally interrupts the neural pathways that have wired around a certain perception of sensation, of feeling. This is really great for sexuality for women who are anorgasmic. This is working great for men with erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation. It just literally separates you. It unhooks you from the identity that's holding that problem.
Oh, I see. I haven't heard it said that way. And that makes so much sense in terms of how the dissociation could work. While you were talking, I don't know why my mind started going to perimenopause and menopause. And then my question at this was, can ketamine save marriage? Can ketamine save marriages during menopause and perimenopause? Period. Question mark.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Not a guarantee if that marriage needs to end.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because it also collapses the stories. If you choose to offer them to the molecule, this is how I put it. You offer it to the molecule. If you choose to offer the stories you hold about your partner and your marriage, it will reorganize that for you. I can't tell you how many women I've worked with that come out of this experience going, God, he's not so bad. Oh, I can soften some judgment. I can soften this and love him and accept his love him for who he is. Yeah.
Oh, there was something that you wanted to say, and I was trying to find my notes. You wanted to come back to it, but it was about ketamine getting you in touch with yourself. Do you reckon? Okay. I'd love to bring you back to that.
So at the level of identity, okay, so maybe we can borrow from like parts work here from an IFS system, which I use. Yep. A woman going through perimenopause is a radical ego death. Mm-hmm. It's an identity shift, not just because you stop bleeding or menstruating, because society sees you differently. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's just a fact. You go invisible. It's like, you just stop being seen in the same way. And you mentioned pheromones. I think because we're not giving off like fertility pheromones anymore, just like everything gets different. Your body will change no matter what. Not everyone will gain weight the way that I did, but shit changes.
Yeah.
And your identity has to go with that. And there has to be a kind of renegotiation of who you are in the world. And hopefully, and this is what I help women with, that it raises your power, that it's actually an upgrade.
Okay. That's a beautiful message. Mm-hmm. But
you have to get there. Women, you have to get there.
Yeah.
So ketamine helped me profoundly bless, give thanks, and release that former menstrual identity that I had as a woman and step into a new chapter of my life. But I had to let that go. I had to let the old me go.
Yeah.
So that a better me, a new me, a more powerful, wise, mature me could step in. So ketamine, again, peeled that off in such a graceful, beautiful, blessed way. And we need to, as women who are in midlife, define what the fuck we want our middle age to look like. And technically we're beyond middle age, but unless we define it for ourselves, we're going to default to what society defines it as, to what we saw in our role models, which we have few women that we can really emulate or look to who are not also sex symbols or celebrities. We have few women who are embodied and empowered and fucking badasses and just in total sovereignty and ownership of their age and their body as is. We have few role models. So we need to define this shit cognitively. I want X, Y, and Z for myself. So when you're in the work of ketamine, that molecule lays the wet cement, and ladies, you start to imprint what you want there for the rest of your life.
Wow. That is powerful. And also what I would imagine is bomb ass sex still, right?
Yes.
The reimagining of just this idea that, I'm not at that place in my life. I'm 38, but obviously I'm 38. It's not that it's when I hear it, it's like I can feel my own, maybe because I do want to have children. So this triggers a little of my own fear, but also there was a real reason that I wanted you on and to talk about it and to bring light and understanding both to myself and to anybody else who's on this path, especially if you're in my age zone, right? The millennial group is it's crazy to me when I still feel like this young pup inside myself, but I was like, well, I guess if I heard I was 38, at this point, I'm changing. I noticed when I looked in the mirror, it was I want to say it was 36 or 37. I was like, oh, when did I become a mature woman? I suddenly see it, and it is a process, and not that fear of, I've been a beautiful woman my entire life. And I think there is that fear of letting that go or being seen differently or not being seen for what has always been actually something that has been very powerful for me in my life and has opened up opportunity, because we do live in a society that there is pretty privilege, and that is just that is a fact that's here, and I'm very grateful for it. And it also helps shine a light of this isn't forever, how you look. And so I'm grateful for this conversation because of what it's illuminating in me. And also just wanting to hear now from you, talk to me about dating on the other side of this, and sexuality and pleasure and not worrying about getting pregnant. Let's be honest.
The best part.
Right.
Well, I mean, there are many great parts of it. And yes, again, defining that for yourself, now is a great time to start defining that, because for most women, perimenopause is a complete surprise. And, by the time you're going to approach that phase, and women your age and younger, we will have laid the foundation for you, my sisters, because there's a revolution happening right now about menopause, and I'm part of it. And I'm so delighted to be part of it, because I never want any woman to go through what I went through, which was total shock and confusion and pain and suffering for so many years. So you're in good shape. I just want to say that.
Cool.
But there does need to be a renegotiation of where you source your power. Now, if you're a woman like you or myself included, that by default, we source our power from our beauty and our sense of worthiness, connected, I don't want to say dependent upon, but definitely informed by our sexual attraction.
Yeah.
You're in trouble if that's the only place you source it from.
Yeah.
So as I began to age and go through perimenopause and people looked at me differently, suddenly men weren't looking at me the same, that's for sure. I realized like, oh, I need to dig a little deeper now and pull forward, call out these other parts of myself that I have actually have the great privilege to develop, such as my education, my intellect, my knowledge. So I got to source my worth from other places too, and also just my inherent worth from being a child of God, and you will need to draw upon that. So my message is to bolster that now, to diversify and expand the spectrum from which you define who you are in the world. And that's going to serve you, because after menopause, let's say generally after 50, 52, 53, you have a lot of years left.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You got a lot of life to live. So you may not be sourcing that from your attractiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You might be completely beautiful, but the world is going to see you differently. Not as not beautiful, but just different.
Yes.
And ketamine can really, really help with this.
Wow. Hello, my friends. It's your host, Kat Walsh. I want to take a few minutes away from the episode and both tell you a story and also talk to you about something that I am so excited and just to share with the world. But before I even get into that, I want to first caveat this with a very short story. I was just telling a friend the other day that if I had 3 months to live, there is nothing that I would change about my life. Nothing. I wanted to make sure that Trip on This season 4 was the best that it could be. I'm finally going to another country. I'm going to Portugal, my first time ever living abroad. But the thing that I want to talk most about right now is I have released my self-guided microdosing program called The Miracle Zone. The Miracle Zone is my prayer for the world. It has been the journey of a lifetime for me. It is an invitation. It is a seed. It is the beginning of awakening to our fullest potential, our power, our courage, and the life that we can look back at the end of our days and say, I went for it. That has been what my whole life has been about since 2020, since I began this journey of Trip on This, since I began becoming an entrepreneur, since I began this path. And the love and the joy and the pride that I feel inside of myself is not just a cat journey. This is the human journey when we discover just how amazing we are. And so this program called The Miracle Zone that I have created is a living embodiment of hopefully inspiration, of guidance back to your highest potential. And so if you hear this and you feel that you're ready to discover all that you are and all that you can do in this life, I invite you to check out my Miracle Zone microdosing program. It is available on both my websites, lifewithkatwalsh.com, as well as the Trip on This website. And again, it's self-guided. No microdoses are not included. Yes, I do have preferred partners and resources. I will say nothing more about it on that front. But yes, everything that you would need to have is included in this program. But again, the microdoses themselves are not actually sold in this self-download. As always, thank you all for listening to Trip on This. Thank you all for being part of my journey. Thank you all for being truly my dream come true. I'm so honored and happy to have you here. I'm so honored to be here. And with that, I pass it back over to whichever guest you're listening to right now, because you know they're probably epic. I hope many people are listening. Women, obviously. I mean, and men too. Honestly, everybody hearing it, because especially if you're in partnership, and you plan to be in partnership with your partner for a long period of time, like just continuing to find ways to come together and to not lose that attraction and that play and the spontaneity and the willingness to go into like some unknown territory, right? With these experiences, that's actually a vital thing to do, right? There's a sense of adventure when we adventure into an experience. And I feel like every time we make a choice that is adventurous, that is actually, that quality is youthful. And and maybe youthful is the wrong word, but vital. There's a vitality to play and adventure and trying new things and literally just trying new things. I mean, I think the people that I've seen get, quote, old in my life are the ones who listened to society and said, they chose to get old. Basically, they stopped dancing because they put down the idea of having fun and, like getting to express yourself the way you want. Like I've definitely had people, I used to wear like crop tops and things, and I've had a couple, not much, but like one comment, like, it's something about it. I was like, I'm gonna probably dress like a teenager and as long as I can. I don't know what else. I like it. But I just feel like there's, it's this invitation is what I'm hearing to create your life. Actually, this is instead of just surrendering to biology right now. It's like, okay, yeah, that is happening. And we've also created something that is also can help us change our response to biology and can help us create new pathways and connections to one another and ourselves.
Absolutely. Creating that for yourself. And we have to talk about hormones a little bit here, because your hormones will become your messengers. And menopause is absolutely an initiation, and it will work on you. It is the ultimate medicine journey, but the medicine are your hormones. And so after menopause, you want different things. Your sex won't feel the same. It will feel different. For many, it feels better. It's more exciting. It's more arousing, but your sexual arousal system changes because the hormones are different. So I want to just drop this one little piece of science here for anyone approaching or in perimenopause, menopause, is that your sexual arousal system is less likely to be spontaneous and more likely to be responsive.
What do you mean by that? Can you peel that away a little bit?
Yeah. So spontaneous arousal is like, oh, I want to jump your bones.
Right.
So you're initiating sex and you're saying, or you're walking around, you feel horny. You're like, oh God, I want to have sex tonight. Have that feeling. So that's mostly from testosterone with some estrogen supporting it. So when those levels lower, you might not walk around feeling like, oh man, I'm horny. In fact, you could maybe go a while without having sex, longer than you used to. But the response of arousal is like, oh, I'm going to lean back and wait and see what comes my way.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So responsive arousal is when something or someone comes to you, makes an offer, and your body says, oh, I like that.
Okay.
Or maybe this would be better. So you become physiologically more responsive than spontaneous. So that doesn't mean stop having sex. It just means you get to lean back, open yourself, and receive the offer.
Yeah. What would you recommend to women going into this? I mean, you kind of are, other than, let's say, ketamine, obviously ketamine being one tool, but what are some daily practices for our sexual well-being and mental health? Let's broaden this out, because if men are still listening to this, bless your heart, thank you so much.
No, you need to listen to this, my brother.
Yes, you need to be listening to this. But, we don't know if they're here yet. But yeah, no, if they are, I'd love to hear from you, like some daily practices around our sexual health as human beings. I don't know if you speak to them male perspective, but if you do, great. And if not, for women, both of menopausal age and those that are not.
I think it's so important now. Like, I've been a therapist for 25 years and specializing in sex therapy for 13 or 14, 15.
Yeah.
And it's so important to know, understand, and love your own erotic psyche. And what that requires is for you to get out of your habits and your patterns. So if that's watching porn, I'm not against porn, but watching porn and being hooked on that is going to limit your nervous system and your sexual brain so much. Get out of your habits. Your vibrator. Don't get hooked on your vibrator. I'm not against vibrators. Vibrators are wonderful for bringing a woman to orgasm. But if you get hooked on that, you're really limiting like your dopamine circuits in your brain and like what you actually orgasm from. So stay open-minded, stay curious about your sex. This is literally the most important thing, is to understand that sex is an ever expanding universe. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to like go to the sex store and buy all the toys, or like to watch the different kinds of porn, but actually go deeper and really love and understand and accept your little kinks, your turn-ons, track them, play with them, adore them, exaggerate, like be playful.
Yeah.
That's my biggest recommendation. There's more from there, but that's the big one.
I think it's a great recommendation. I might have mentioned this on the podcast, but the brain is an efficiency machine. So it's always going to go to like the quickest orgasm. It's like very much, yeah, it just like once you start, it wants to go to that. And so we have images or videos or certain types of content that is like our cheat sheet to that. And I feel like it takes actually like, but if that's the cheat sheet that you're telling your body over and over and over again, and then you have sex, there's a misfire here that can happen. You know, like if you're watching always something that's very extreme and then you're not actually experiencing extreme anything right now, you're just having like a nice monogamous like experience that there might be a little bit,
dissonance.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. And also, I've mentioned this as well, like, if it's always so mental, how do you get embodied? You know, if we're always using mental fantasies as opposed to like sensation, then even with a partner, then where are we? Right? Like, where are we during the experience? Are we fully there, just breathing into sensation? Is there more layered on top of this experience? So I feel like I think that's the curiosity that you're mentioning. And I always heard actually with a vibrator that it can create basically like a callus or maybe that's the wrong word, but basically where it numbs it.
Desensitizes.
Yeah, desensitizes it. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And I love what you're saying because it's so important to understand the nervous system and that sex is not actually a genital event. It's a neurological event. It happens in the brain and the nervous system. So when you understand it from a nervous system perspective and understand that if words are the language of the brain, sensation is the language of the body.
Oh.
And being able to track sensations in your body at all times increases the size of a part of your brain called the insula. That's a little donut-shaped part of the brain. It's also involved in what we call like the Godhead. It's like the spiritual center of the brain. And the way that you grow the insula is by tracking body sensations. And when you have like a really big, plump, juicy, fat insula, look, we can image this and see how big your insula is. And insula is involved in orgasm. It's also involved in intuition, gut instinct, clairvoyance. So this is how your sex is connected to your spirituality, is through the insula. Google it. It's amazing to understand this, and it will inform your sex life.
Oh, this is like one of the final questions I have is spirituality, actually. So you're kind of brought right back to it, is like through these practices and psychedelics and sexuality, where does spirituality kind of fit in here to the whole thing?
In my book, it's the crux of everything. Yeah. It may not be for everybody. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, it's how you define spirituality, I guess. Yep. You know, that you could go into an IV ketamine clinic and it's like not a spiritual experience at all, and you won't get great results. But if you work with a practitioner, asterisk, I didn't mention this earlier, ketamine works fantastically virtual. So we're actually seeing better outcomes with people who work with it virtually because they're at home.
I mean, that makes sense. That makes absolute sense.
Zoom ketamine sessions are amazing. You finish the session, you close your device, you go to sleep or you move and wiggle or whatever.
Right.
But that's a sidebar. So how spirituality is involved in this is that when you bring your spiritual tools, whatever that is for you, into the experience and you braid them. So you braid the psychedelic with your spiritual references. And then, of course, we know that the psychedelic, whatever it be, is going to open your mind to other dimensions and other ideas. And whether it's psilocybin or MDMA or whatever, it's known for creating more of a connection to the ineffable. It gives you a relationship to awe, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So just, I would say, even if you don't identify as spiritual, bringing your relationship to awe to the experience is going to make it so much richer.
I couldn't agree more. Awe and bliss. Like I remember most people I just don't know have ever experienced awe. And I feel very grateful that I have had many moments of feeling awe and realizing like, that is absolutely synonymous for me with the divine, like that feeling of being so breathtaking and that it's inside of us. And like, I think that's the most exciting part about all of this. I was just coming off of a retreat and I was looking up at the trees and through my spiritual journey and psychedelics and crying and, the whole process of life, just looking up and just feeling the beauty and the love and the beauty that I felt in myself and thinking, this is for everyone. Everyone has this inside them, everyone. And our job really is just to, just peel away the places where we can't see it. But I was quite literally like on the grass, like looking up at trees and just being like, this is wonder, like this whole fucking experience that we're having. And so it's really, I'm so grateful for people like yourself and for molecules like ketamine and sexuality that helps us get to ecstatic states of bliss and wonder and awe. And whether you want to call that spirituality or not, fine. It's funny to me that everyone says like, oh my God, like during sex, like it's so common. It's like, oh my God, or whatever. Like to,
literally. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, I mean,
yeah,
I feel like God,
exactly.
it just happens to like pop out. Like maybe I don't even know. Everyone's like, really, Kat, what are you doing in there? But I don't know. I feel like oh my God is just something that's constantly used in our lexicon for lots of things, actually. I'm like, but why?
I love it. I love what you said about just removing the blinders to the divine. That psychedelics they just remove what's in the way of you seeing how little we know and how small we really are in the divine schema of the cosmos. Yeah. That's such an important, humbling state that we reach as humans.
Yeah. Yeah. Whoa. My light, just as you said that, my whole light just turned on. Like way different. Well, on spirits, like let there be light. Well, on that note, Eva, what do you have coming up? How can people work with you? How can people find you online? Where can they connect?
Yeah, absolutely. Come talk to me at evaclay.com. And on there are descriptions of my ketamine work, which I do both, as I mentioned, in person and virtually. I want to really encourage people to think about that. And then I do have a platform called The Erotic Midlife. You can also find that on my website. You can also come play with me on Instagram, Eva Clay, and follow me, and you'll get lots of great tips and inspiration around sexuality, psychedelics, and midlife. I absolutely love what I do, and I'm so blessed. I get to do it every day. Yeah. So come talk to me.
I can tell. Yeah. That's why you glow from the inside out. So thank you. Thanks. Thank you for coming on. And for everyone, as always, trip on this.